Daniel Dubois just knocked out Anthony Joshua, and for some reason that made me think and realize that boxing is better than MMA now. Now, it used to be boxing was better than MMA and it was more popular, and then there was a switch. There was a switch where MMA was better than boxing. MMA was creating fights that people wanted to see, and boxers were avoiding them. But now it has switched, and boxers are finally fighting the top boxers, and now MMA fighters, are they really fighting the top guys that they should be fighting? I just want to say Daniel Dubois, he's the GOAT. He knocked out Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua is a goof. His whole attitude, but that's for another video. But yeah, I've noticed that in the last couple of years, boxing has made fights that people want to see. And has the UFC, I'm going to use a UFC because that is MMA. Like, anytime someone thinks about MMA, they think about the UFC. So we're going to use the UFC. Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia. That fight happened because the people wanted to see it, and it's a fight that needed to be happening. Two top guys in the 135 division that needed to fight each other, and it did happen, and look at how great that was. The pay-per-view numbers on that, I know were good. And yeah, Usyk versus Tyson Fury, another fight that was just, the fans needed to see it, and it's two of the best heavyweights against each other, so of course they're gonna fight, right? Now we have Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. Can someone please tell me why this fight isn't happening? Oh wait, because Jon Jones is afraid to lose his O. Even though he has one loss, we know, like, oh, that's not a loss. He's afraid to lose his O. And Tom Aspinall obviously is the reason for that, because Jon knows he would lose to Tom Aspinall. And this is ruining MMA as we speak. At least the heavyweight division, it is ruining it. And I think just this is like how boxers used to be maybe 3 years ago. Even we saw a lot in the lower weight classes, from like 130 to 150, around those weight classes. We saw a lot where fighters would avoid each other and then they fought each other, like Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis. And then you had Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. You had Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia too. That was a great fight that the people needed to see. You had Devin Haney versus Lomachenko. And all these fights started happening because the people needed to see it, and boxing realized that it needed to catch up. They realized that the YouTubers, literally YouTube YouTube boxing was probably a big reason for this too. Real boxers, they knew they needed to catch up, and they started making these fights happen. This singular fight right here is ruining MMA right now as we speak, because Jon Jones is going to fight Stipe Miocic next, and that makes no sense because right now Stipe is not next in line for the belt. It is Tom Aspinall, a person who has defended an interim belt, so he should obviously be fighting Jon Jones next. It just makes no sense. One other reason is, why don't we have these interviews anymore? One-on-one interviews. Boxing has always had face-to-face interviews, and they're great. They provide so much entertainment and build up to the fight, where fighters talk trash to each other. And the UFC does not do that anymore. They used to have these, like they did it with Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier, and I know they've done it a bunch of other times. Why isn't there any of these anymore? I don't know why, and it's terrible for promotion. None of these UFC cards that should be getting promoted are not being promoted. One example of this was Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis. Why did they not have a sit-down talk like this? Or why was there only one pre-press conference? It was terrible. No reporters asked good questions, which that's something I'll move on to. And then at the actual press conference, it was just terrible. If we look at UFC press conferences now, a lot of them they're only 30 minutes long. Obviously, the No Shave once in a lifetime event, it was 40 minutes, right? Why was Islam versus Poirier only 30 minutes? UFC 300, of course, that was close to an hour. Makes sense. But all these press conferences, they should be longer, and reporters should be asking questions that actually matter. Now, I'm going to use John Morgan as an example. Now, I have nothing against John Morgan. I think he sometimes does ask good questions, but most of the time, these reporters are asking the dumbest questions. You know how many times the UFC, they've been in Vegas? You know how many times a reporter has asked, "Hey, Dana White, how does it feel to be back in Vegas?" No one cares. Ask the fighters real questions. I really don't understand it. Um, the reporters are ruining the sport too. Also, at press conferences, they ask the dumbest questions. John Morgan, like, I mean, I have nothing against John Morgan. I'm just using his face because he's a well-known reporter in the UFC. Moving on, we have no real beef in MMA anymore. Obviously, with Conor McGregor versus Khabib, and then with Jorge Masvidal versus Colby Covington, or Colby Covington versus Conor McGregor, or Kamaru Usman. Sorry about that. Uh, that's not a bad return fight for Conor McGregor at 170. That's like, now that I think of it, that's a pretty good fight to make at 170. If Conor McGregor wants to return at 170, him versus Colby Covington would be so good. Sorry, I got sidetracked there, but that's a pretty good idea, right? Anyways, there's no real beef anymore. Why don't we have people throwing chairs anymore? Oh wait, because the UFC does not allow it. Dana White also, hold on, let me just throw Dana White up here. Dana White is also a big reason for this, is because he puts no promotional efforts into these events anymore. Like I said, he cuts people off at press conferences. He ends the press conferences so short at 30 minutes. And he doesn't really allow fighters to beef anymore. And it creates no build-up for fights. Yeah, like, Dana White, he's in his own head right now. He's doing his power slap thing. No one watches power slap. All the fake stats he says about it are untrue, obviously. And yeah, this is kind of like a little yap of a video, but I don't care. You guys know what I mean, though. These are like, why was UFC 300 not promoted? Why was UFC 304 not promoted? Even though it was Bilal Muhammad versus Leon Edwards, why didn't they at least have a face-to-face before that? They do not. The UFC doesn't do these anymore, and I don't know why. Or where they have Joe Rogan or something, or John Anik in the middle of these fighters. They have 3 chairs, John Anik or Joe Rogan in the middle, one fighter on one side and one fighter on the other. I do not know why they don't do that. They need to take that from boxing. Boxing has always done that, and they will continue to do it because they know it builds up intensity, it builds up beef and bad blood for the fight. And yeah, I don't understand why the UFC is doing it. I think it's for one main reason, and I think it's because of Dana White. I think he's in his own little head right now, and I don't think he's listening to anyone. I think he thinks he knows everything about everything. I think he thinks all these media guys don't know what they're talking about. He doesn't take advice from anyone. I think Dana White is running the UFC into the ground for now. I mean, there's just no promotion. Promotion is the main thing. And also, Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. This fight is ruining the sport. How can a fight be ruining the sport? Because it's not happening. This fight is the only fight that should be happening at heavyweight. This would be the biggest fight at heavyweight. If you really think Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic is bigger than Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones, you're delusional and crazy. The only people who are going to buy a pay-per-view for Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic is 45-year-old dads who watched them 10 years ago. Those are the only people. Those are the same people who cannot name you one other champ in the UFC or any other weight class. They only know Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little yap session. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And yeah, let me know any video ideas I should do next. And peace out.